Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the College of Extended and International Education's CSUDH International Scholar Seminar Series, entitled The Manipulations of Facts and Findings in Politics and Public Policy Making. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Hamoud Salih, the Associate Dean of International Education and the Senior International Officer, who will introduce our speaker today. Dr. Salih.
Thank you so much, Armand, and thank you for organizing this, and the staff who are also participating in our group of scholars and the campus. Welcome, Dr. Kamieniecki. Let me begin by telling you that you were my first professor at USC. I don't know how you put up with our poor English and all those wonderful stuff that the struggle we were going. But I still remember a few instances where you taught me a great lot of lessons, and which I still tell my students these days. The story was about my frustration with the book that you had assigned at the time, Thomas Kuhn, The Scientific Revolution. And I remember vividly until today how I was in the office with really a big face, a bit frustrated, and telling you, this is why I remember that I don't know if this author knows how to write, or my English is too bad. But you listened, you let me finish my frustration, and then you explained to me what the book is all about. And I do remember till today what you said and how I used that explanation in my classroom. So thank you. So those were, yeah, I learned also you're very attentive. Your lectures are always clear, and that helps an international student whose first semester in an American university learning in another language. That was a big help, and I still carry that today in my classrooms and hopefully I would say my administrative duties. So thank you again for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
So your accomplishments are outstanding and in many areas. For our Professor Sheldon Kamieniecki is Emeritus Dean at UC Santa Cruz. He was a professor and chair of the Political Science Department at the University of Southern California. He's the founding director of the Environmental Studies at USC. He's also a winner of many awards, including the Outstanding Senior Faculty at USC, has written 11 books and 30 journals and book chapters. He's also past president of the Public Policy section in the American Political Science Association. And last but not least, the UC Santa Cruz established the Kamieniecki Lecture in US Environmental Policies lecture series in his honor. His talk today, as Armand stated, is manipulation of facts and scientific funding in politics and public policy. The format for this lecture is Kamieniecki time to present his talk, and then we'll open it to questions and answers. Welcome, Dr. Kamieniecki. It's an honor, and thank you for all what you did for us, students, your graduates, and we are always grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this incredibly, not only important topic that its importance is ongoing, but also the timeliness of it. We're right in the midst of dealing with these issues of policy and politics versus science and truth, and hopefully I could help everyone maybe think about and maybe even more clearly understand the issues involved. I do have to admit I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of the good questions, and so I hope to share that with you. And I will talk for a while and then open it up to questions and answers, and then we can go from there and delve more deeply into the material that I present. I want to start out by discussing the whole area of science and everything we've gotten out of science and medicine since the 1800s, frankly, for a very, very long time. There's been incredible advancements in our knowledge and our information base and in our technology involving medicine and healthcare and so on, as well as in other areas that are science related. For example, the transportation and manufacturing. We now get on jets and fly all over the world. And what would people from 100 years ago think if they could materialize and view this? This would be unbelievable just to think that. They saw birds flying, but humans, maybe not. Maybe that would have taken a long time, but it really hasn't. Things have advanced very quickly. And in manufacturing, all the equipment they now have to produce products and all kinds of things that we use in our daily lives that are very, very important to us. The area of energy production is another area where we've made incredible advances, moving from, at the turn of the century during the Industrial Revolution, the use of oil and manufacturing gasoline, and then creating the automobile and running the automobile on gasoline. And although first electric was an incredible advancement for humans around the earth, what they could do, and then leading that to powered trucks and other larger machines. It's been quite amazing. In the field of medicine, all the advancements, the polio vaccine, smallpox, just about getting rid of smallpox from the planet, hepatitis C, a vaccine for that, and the measles vaccine is 97% efficacious. Just amazing advancements. Cancer has been a little slow in terms of the advancements. We've spent billions and billions of dollars, and we're still measuring in many areas of cancer. There's been some improvements in breast cancer, prostate cancer, but we're still measuring in lung cancer and other cancers progress in days and weeks and months. And we've not really, we've got a lot more to do there. Weather in the natural environment and how weather affects us. We can now predict if a tornado is coming or hurricanes. We can now track them and predict where they're going. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, they were not able to do that. They didn't even know they were coming. So they were really caught off guard, and it led to a huge loss of life and of course, injury. Sewage treatment, which we take granted in a lot of the advanced developed world, is incredibly important for developing countries. And the progress we've made in treating sewage and then disposing of it and so on is just been tremendous and it has led to a longer lifespans for a lot of people around the world. Communications technology, look what we're doing right now. We're having this incredible call and lecture on a computer that wasn't possible 50, 100 years ago. Just trying to travel that distance would have been a hardship as well without air travel and so on. Data science and computers more generally, we can now store so much data that it's just incredible. I remember when I first started my graduate work, going to the computer center and having to deal with 7 and 9 track reels, reel-to-reels, to put data on that. And today, and it was a huge computer center. Today, everything in that computer center could fit on my watch. It's amazing how we've advanced in that area, and we will continue to advance, of course. And then, of course, space exploration. It's been incredible how much humans, and not only Americans, but Russians and others have been able to launch vehicles into space, the use of satellites, our knowledge now of other galaxies and stars and so on is just expanded tremendously. And so in short, we've made truly a lot of advances in science, and we should be very grateful for those advances. I think overall they've improved our quality of life. Of course, not all of these advances have been positive, and one has to admit that clearly. For example, our advanced development has led to increased levels of air pollution and water pollution in many parts of the world, particularly in industrial areas and urban areas. And trying to treat that and trying to reduce that has been slow because it involves costs, perceived costs, financial costs, and a lot of our political leaders have not been willing to, up until now, to bear them. Of course, science and medicine have showed us that these are really dangerous to us. And today, if you go to countries like India and China, you go to Beijing and other large cities in India, you can see the effects of air pollution, although many countries are beginning to address these issues, and water pollution as well. Many of our fresh waters have become polluted because of increased industrialization. Health and medicine, although I mentioned a lot of advancements, we've also had problems. The famous thalidomide issue in the 50s and 60s, a drug that was given to women who were pregnant to help them with their insomnia and other maladies, turned out to have a detrimental effect on babies being born, and in many cases even deformed. And before they could realize what was going on, too many people were negatively affected by that unfortunate use. And what happened was basically they did not test it adequately, and they put it on the market without testing and investigation and experimentation. And this is and this happened. There are other examples of this too. Not many, but there are other examples of this as well. Smoking cigarettes. For a long time, the tobacco industry was telling us that there was no problems with smoking tobacco, and of course, the science and medicine did catch up, but not until many people contracted lung cancer and other maladies, heart disease, and so on. And so we have had to dial back the encouragement for smoking significantly. For the first time, we're beginning to see declines in smoking, not only in the advanced developed world, but also in developing countries as well, where it's been a bigger problem for many governments and public health in general. Recently, aspirin was thought to have helped with heart disease and so on. And they found more recently, the last 2-3 years, that no, it's not that good. It doesn't really help that much. And in fact, it could lead to, there's much greater risk of having strokes. And so now people are being asked to not take aspirin regularly and to avoid that because of the cost benefit that has come about, our knowledge of that. And then, of course, the most unfortunate example is weaponry. Our advancements in weaponry, going back from the late 1800s to the development of nuclear weapons. We live in a very, very dangerous world. Fortunately, we have not had any real major issues that have come up in terms of actual use of these weapons. But as time goes on, and as more countries adopt and are able to adopt this technology through their scientific advancements, we will be in that situation where we may very well see, unfortunately, the use of nuclear weapons because not everybody's responsible. It's humans that are dictating this. So, but I think overall we've had, if you're looking at both sides, we've had a very good, positive impact on the public and on the well-being of humans in terms of science and technology. But there have been some costs, and I want to, of course, acknowledge that And the other issue with the advancements, though, that I didn't mention and I should have, is also the disproportionately advantages that people have gotten around the world, where we have basically advanced more in some areas in technology and science, and those technology and science have been very slow to be adopted in other countries. And to a large degree, a lot of it has to do with economics and finances, the willingness to do the research and to come up with products to help the public, and then implement them to adapt other technologies and sciences from other countries and bring it over. It is true that in the advanced industrialized countries, you have far more accesses to increased effective medicine and the advantages of science. And so that needs to be, even within the United States, you have issues with that. And we just saw that, have seen this with the pandemic, where a large number of African Americans and Hispanics and other people of color who are on the front line of fighting the pandemic, our essential workers, have been disproportionately exposed to COVID-19. And that is something that needs to be corrected as well. I just want to mention, since I'm a social scientist, to recognize that there is a difference between science and social science. And a lot of it has to do with objectivity and subjectivity. I think in the sciences, and also the development of the scientific method, which is more difficult to apply in terms of research in the social sciences. The sciences have a big advantage over the social sciences because most of what they look at tend to be observable and measurable very easily. They're tangible. We in the social sciences, however, deal with so much exception. He's trying to just analyze human behavior per se is very, very difficult. Humans, there's no formula for human behavior. There's always exceptions. And what we tend to do is back up and look for patterns, general patterns in the population of particular human behavior, whether it be voting behavior or public opinion, leadership, how government functions, whatever the case may be. Humans are much more difficult to look at than if you're looking at just atoms and electrons and protons and DNA and RNA and so on that are observable in the lab. But the scientific method is very important for science. It helps them to basically come up with the truth. If they follow the scientific method, which is a series of steps that researchers go through to analyze particular instances, you should come up with factual information, information that you can count on, and that probably may have some exceptions, but very, very few. The vaccines I was just mentioning, it's just amazing. And the new vaccines for the pandemic by Pfizer and Moderna and others, incredible efficacy rates. It's quite unbelievable. But they still have, some people will still get it. Very, very, very few, but still, even after having the vaccine. But that is very, very different from what goes on in the social sciences. This also brings in to the whole discussion in looking at science and even social science, the issue of government, what the function of government is and should be, and what policymakers have been doing and should be doing at this point in time in our existence. The use of science has been a huge advantage for government. All the advances that I mentioned before, many of them have been adopted very quickly by government and policymakers in how they distribute resources and manage humans in the workplace and all sorts of things that have made their job not only easier, but more helpful in terms of bringing quality of life to people around the world. One of the areas that has been a debate over has been forest management, where you do have people on either side disagreeing based on the science even as to how is the best way to manage forests. And that has led to a lot of conflict, not only in this country, but in countries around the world. And of course, the most notable example right now is the burning of the Amazon forests to provide land for cattle raising, grazing, and agriculture, and so on, and what impact that's having on the Earth's environment. And so there, despite the fact that we get a lot of truth from science, and it generates a lot of factual information, we still have people, humans, as social scientists would underscore, making the decisions. And that's where we get into a lot of trouble because they have other agendas and they don't always follow the facts and the truth and science that's generated from people who are doing scientific research and doing very, very good scientific research. There's also the issue of economic prosperity and whether or not countries are doing well or not doing well based on the science that they have access to and how they use it in terms of how government manages it and shares it with the population. We've also had issues in the environmental area, in my area of research, with endangered species and the battle over endangered species, where one side, primarily the scientists, point to the need to protect them and why it's important to protect them in order to preserve the local ecosystems in different parts of the country. On the other side, however, you have stakeholders who are hunting or using land for agriculture or different purposes that fuel their finances and their economic situation. And then we get into a great deal of problems and disagreements over how we should and to what extent we should protect endangered species. How important is it? Is it just a moral or ethical issue? Or are we really threatening the survival of not only other species that are unintended to be affected, but also humans? Because at some point, we're in the ecosystem too, at some point, we will be affected as well. I think the best example of that in my area is climate change and the whole debate over climate change. And unfortunately, the US decision to pull out of the Paris Agreement, which will most notably now we'll get with a new president get back into, but that cost us 4 years of progress we could be making. Some of the leaders in our country, both at the state level as well as the federal level, have even gone as far as to forbid the use of the two words climate change in any government documents, and have ordered their agency heads to eliminate the use of that word for fear of what it could mean to them and the advantage it gives them by taking that hard position with industries, frankly, that either produce at a high level or consume at a high level fuels that spawn off carbon dioxide, as well as other climate gases, methane and other gases that tend to feed the issue of climate change and have negative effects on our climate. Those of you living in Southern California, Northern California, certainly have experienced the wildfires that has been brought on by climate change and the negative effects that it's had. Sea level rise, San Francisco still is beginning to experience that fairly significantly, as is all the way in the other side of the country in Miami, where you're having sea level rise and increased flooding in certain areas. And that's a genie that may have come out of the bottle. It's gonna be very, very hard to put it back into the bottle, but perhaps we can slow it down and begin to mitigate it as much as possible. And of course, transition into cleaner burning energy sources like solar and wind and so on that many countries have been doing, and that unfortunately the U.S. has been a bit slow on taking the lead. And again, hopefully the introduction and the addition of the new president and his administration will change that around, and we'll get better results, not only for our country, but for the world in general, since we are a major contributor to climate change, specifically greenhouse gas emissions. Let's switch now with the time that I've got left here and look at the pandemic and COVID-19. As this is unfortunately a terrific example of how politicians and policymakers, certain politicians and policymakers, have tried to manipulate very good scientific research and the advice of public health officials, and instead have taken positions that have not only done nothing to address the issue, but actually has made it worse. And this is a conundrum, particularly for democracies, where governments are supposed to protect the public health and the well-being of society, have actually, because of their leaders and the decisions of their leaders, and their influence over some parts of the public, have made things much worse than they could have been and should have been. And we are now looking at, of course, I looked this morning, I think in the US alone, it's about 285,000 deaths and approaching 5 million cases very rapidly. And unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse because of what we're seeing now with the hospitalizations and so on, and the lag effect to more serious health issues. But in our country, in the US, we have seen in particular a national government, federal government, with a president that has decided that he was going to ignore the issue, despite the fact that he knew it could be a serious problem. He was told early on, back in December and January, that COVID-19 was impressively contagious and unfortunately extremely dangerous to the public, and that we didn't have any weapons really to attack it. We didn't know much about it. So it was a new virus, a novel virus. And yet he decided that not to do anything. In fact, he said, oh, it's going to go away. There were 15 cases at the time, maybe in late January, it's going to go away. And then February came and it didn't go away. And then March and April. And before we knew it, we had the beginning of the pandemic taking place by mid-March. Things began to get very, very bad. And it really raises the question of why certain leaders in our country took this position, to the point where they even, beyond this, dissuaded people from wearing masks, trying to make it sound like it was a individual freedom issue rather than a public health issue, despite what the science was telling us, particularly by the time March rolled around. And this really has had a major deleterious effect on public health in not only the US, but also other countries as well. In Brazil, even maybe a better example of all of this, where with their president, Jair Bolsonaro, also decided that this was a hoax and he wasn't going to listen to the public health officials, and that people shouldn't worry about it. We're not going to have any masks or do anything about it. And that was a bad mistake. The real conundrum here, though, is that a lot of them, I'm guessing, along with ideology involved, but a lot of them probably were worried that it was going to have a negative effect on the economy. And they knew that they would have to come up for election. And they know very well, and the data bear this out, the social science data bear this out, that populations judge leaders to a large extent based on how good a job they do with the economy and how much prosperity is taking place, and the projection of future economic growth. And they're so afraid of it that they chose to ignore the pandemic and the virus, the spread of the environments, when in fact the opposite would have been actually, if you were really concerned about the economy, the way to go. That is, try to nip it in the bud as quickly as possible, attack it, be aggressive in attacking it, get people to wear masks and socially distance, and really adopt much harsher measures than we now have to because of what's happened. It's quite a paradox that they took these positions, and one has to wonder why. One also has to wonder why, frankly, as well, that large groups of people in various countries, including the US and Brazil, have chosen to believe their leaders, despite the fact that the science is out there, the public health officials like Dr. Fauci and so on are, a lot of times going on TV and explaining the disease and what to do to avoid it and how dangerous it is. And this has caused a lot of trouble to try to control the pandemic because of the incredible contagious nature of the pandemic. And one has to wonder why they were influenced so easily by these leaders. What are they lacking? And it's important, particularly in democratic countries, because if democratic countries are going to survive, we need to really have people who are willing to follow truth and data and science and medicine in terms of what it is recommending for the advancement of the public good and for the good of society. And the other issues that run into all of this as well is the future. I mean, what have we learned from this based on what we have seen taking place? We now have vaccines on the horizon, which is terrific. Although for my taste, they're not coming soon enough. But in terms of science, it was a very rapid development and very impressive, and their effectiveness are incredibly impressive, as I mentioned before. But we're not going to have them until maybe spring or early summer, at least for the majority of the population. And what does this tell us for the future? Because this may not be the first or the last, certainly not the first, and certainly not the last pandemic we're going to have, where we're going to face a virus that's so contagious and so harmful to the public. And we need to stop at some point and begin thinking about what did we do wrong? How could we have limited the negative effects of the virus? How can we prepare for this when President Obama, Vice President Biden left office? They had set up a pandemic office with a playbook on how to deal with pandemics based on research their administration had done. And unfortunately, the administration that followed, the Trump administration, chose to not only gut the playbook, but they also dismantled the pandemic office. That might be one, at least first steps that government could take to try to address what the future holds in terms of future pandemics and how we can best deal with them. Certainly being prepared with professional equipment that's needed on the front lines, and treatment, hospitalization, and all the things that we've run into problems with in dealing with the pandemic. And hopefully we can deal with it. But it does raise issues about what is lacking now. We can't do that until we really study about what has happened, why did it happen, and how can we prevent this? What is lacking both in our government, in our politicians and policymakers, but also within the broad public. And I certainly have ideas about what those things are, but I thought that might end on that note and throw it out for some back and forth and discussion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kamieniecki. So we now open it for discussion, for questions. Let me maybe, until everyone gets a little bit ready for a question, begin perhaps by asking you about in the context of the facts, the fake news that is now slowly, as it is becoming a part of the narrative. It's very interesting, for example, why the information is presented as fake news, but it continues to be reported about. What impact that will have, or that will have on perhaps the vaccine? Only the numbers, there is a concern these days about not all people will be vaccinated. So in a sense, the impact, I'm asking about what impact fake news has had on our discourse.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately a major impact. It's we have this unfortunate situation with the person who is president and about to step down, and will step down whether he knows it or not when it comes time to very shortly, who is dissuading people from, for example, wearing masks and not even doing anything about the illness, to the point where even going even further and recommending maybe we should inject ourselves with disinfectants, or taking certain lights and shining it in somewhere in our body, and that might the COVID-19 would disappear, and people believing this. The drug that he was also hydrochlor, I forgot what it's called. Yeah, he was talking about that he was taking, President Trump was taking, and all the promises he gave without any scientific evidence or facts about whether it works or not on this on COVID-19. You had people calling public health services in their states asking, I took this, the president told me, what can I do now? I'm feeling sick. And of course you go to the hospital. You're not supposed to drink Mr. Clean or Clorox bleach. It's not going to get rid of COVID-19. We know that. It makes you worse. It could kill you, frankly. So I think it's had a very negative impact. And this is maybe a broader discussion, but this is where the media comes in. And I haven't mentioned the media, but I think the media has an incredibly important role in all of this, and to try to educate the public based on scientific evidence, on the truth, on real news, what the preferred behaviors are in order to avoid COVID-19. And I think the media, the media wants to give both sides, right? But in this case, it's not really, it doesn't deserve ethically and morally a balanced approach, because one side is much more detrimental than the other side. Quite the opposite. The other side, the truth, will protect people. And I think this is a problem, but it's also the public too. The public has to be able to evaluate all this, and there's something lacking there, which I'd be more than happy to talk about in a little while, that I think can be corrected as well, and as well as the media. The media needs to play maybe a more aggressive role now, and not hold back, not try to be so objective, if you will, overly objective to the point where they bend over backwards. They're breaking their backs, and they're breaking our backs by not being more aggressive about conveying to us what's the scientific evidence, why is it, and who believes this, and so on, and why you should follow this, and now what the President of the United States is saying, which is difficult, but still had to be done in this case.
We have a question from the chat. Is this Nicole, I believe, or Coleman? Is Coleman there? Let me ask you then. What cultural approach do you see fit to increase minority groups, such as Latino, African Americans, be more receptive to taking the vaccine? Yeah,
that's a good question. And you began just a second ago with that, and I meant to circle back to that. I don't think we can lump together the experiences that different minority groups have had, peoples of color groups have had with science and with vaccines more generally. Unfortunately for African Americans, at least in our country, and maybe in other places as well, they have been literally experimented, deceived, if you will, if I can go that far, into taking certain drugs and medicines and vaccines that have had very negative effects on them. And really without their permission, frankly, because they didn't know what they were taking and what the side effects would be. In fact, that's why they were giving it to them, is they were trying to find out what the side effects are. And so I think within that cultural milieu, a concern has grown from in terms of African Americans, where today only about 42%, I've seen the latest poll, are willing to take these vaccines, which is a very low number. We really need them up to about 70%. So that's a huge difference, and it's going to take role models like Barack Obama in our country, Barack Obama, athletes, singers and entertainers, particularly for young people, and to try to get the confidence that they should have. And I'm assuming there aren't negative effects with these vaccines, that they are safe. If that's the case, and it appears to be the case given the results that we're seeing, incredible results we're seeing from the trials, that they should be taken. It's in their interest to take the vaccines, not only their personal interest, but their family's interest and everyone that comes into contact with them, because it's not, it's like secondhand smoke. If you want to smoke, then it's not illegal in our country to smoke cigarettes, but if you smoke it and there are other people who don't want to smoke, and we never knew this before, and they inhale it, it has a very bad effect on their lungs as well. And so so that freedoms are not absolute. You may have your individual freedom not to wear a mask, but my goodness, if you don't, you're going to infect other people. So you've got to draw the line. And I think a lot of the groups, particularly people from Latin America and Central America, particularly they've experienced dictatorships where they're very suspicious of government. It'll be much more difficult and more challenging for our government to try to persuade them. So those are two examples where they're very different experiences. And so we have to address each one differently in order to be able, with people working on it from those groups, the experts represented, we have a diverse set of experts working on how to address African Americans and trying to persuade them to take vaccine, and Hispanics to take vaccines as well.
Well, thank you.
We have a question from Emiko Kawashimi.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a lot of informative information. I do have a question. As a social scientist, do you feel the need to educate the public? So in terms of societal goods like social welfare to protect the others, over some people think this is part of the socialism, right? Because the government is dictating individuals' right to choose. But I think maybe some people don't really understand what it means to help or protect the public versus individuals' right to choose.
Yeah.
So I'm not an expert in this field, but I would love to hear your feedback as to what we can do better to educate the public?
First off, let me say you hit the nail on the head. I wouldn't just say socialism, but authoritarianism and other forms that appear to dictate to the public what they can't and cannot do very strictly. And socialism, of course, is part of that. But I'm saying you hit the nail on the head because I think that is the issue right now. And I will take the blame as a social scientist and all the classes that I've had. And I think my colleagues need to accept the blame as well, that we have not done a very good job at all in educating the public, not only on these moral and ethical issues and democratic theory and so on, about the tension between individual freedom and the protection of the society and where it begins and where it ends, and go through examples of that, which would be very instructive, I think, for students. But also in terms of how you evaluate truth, or at least evidence that's more compelling versus not. And I will take blame for that too. But on behalf of all social scientists in the world right now, but I can't just let only social scientists take the blame. I also have to, frankly, accuse the natural scientists for dropping the ball on this as well. They have not educated the public well enough. And I think our colleges and universities have suffered in this regard by narrowing continuously their course of study, where the students hardly get any social sciences. And so they're not very good at communicating, not to overgeneralize, but many of them are not good to communicate. They don't even know these issues. They never, what you just said, they would never have thought of, is they probably never had a class with you or from you about these issues and heard you talk about these issues and why they are so important and how we need to navigate around them based on connecting up facts and knowledge that the experts have come up with. And I think the natural scientists really need to think about the kind of curriculum, and it's not only at the university level, it's got to be lower. There's a lot of people don't go to college. It's got to be at the high school level as well, to introduce these issues and introduce the whole scientific method and its power, but also these incredibly important democratic theoretical tenets and issues and questions that society needs to address.
Do we have any other questions, Armand?
Yes, we do. Kimmy Solomon has a question.
You're muted, Kim.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's been a very informative section, and you have touched bases on different issues. My question is in line with the level of advancement in science and technology in the United States. And looking at the pandemic, the number of people who have died in the United States is kind of alarming if we try to compare and contrast to the level of science advancement and technology as well. I'm trying to look at what is currently going on in United Arab Emirates, like in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Like the vaccine have been out since September, and the public are having access to it since last month, November. And in the US, we're still talking about the vaccine coming out in spring, which we are not even sure of the date. So I'm wondering, compared to the level of the advancement in science and technology, how does that work, or what can you say about that?
Yeah, I think that while the United States has been very good at advancing technology and science, it has not been very good at, as good as it's been in advancing science and technology, which is incredibly impressive. it has not been as good as advancing political theory and political philosophy, as well as all these issues of democracy, how democracy works, what you as a citizen, what role you are playing in democracy, to what extent do you have to take on responsibility for the good of other people, versus to what extent do you also have to look out for yourself? Where do you draw that line? We don't have these conversations often until you get into maybe advanced college courses or even graduate programs. And I think that's a shame. I do think, though, I think to kind of anticipate your comeback to me as to why that is, and maybe you're asking me that now, I do think that it has to do with, at the heart of it, with capitalism and the kinds of values and morals and basically frameworks of thinking and political ideology and all of that, that it engenders in a lot of our citizens. That capitalism has done a marvelous job in many areas. I mean, all these scientific advances and all the prosperity that the U.S. has enjoyed and so on. For the most part, there have been problems, and I mentioned what the problems were, like environmental degradation. There have been negative side issues, but overall, it's been very successful. In fact, one could argue too successful, to the point where it has blinded people from moving away from the economic arguments and concerns to our concern for our fellow human beings. And I think that's been as much as we've made advancements in science technology, we've failed in that area, particularly given the quality of our education, especially at the college and university level. And it may be, the problem may be at the high school and mid-school and elementary school level, I believe, but I'm not sure. That it could be the case. I don't know if that made sense or not to you.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else, Armand?
No, I don't see any other questions.
Let me then maybe address a related issue to what you talked about, Dr. Kamieniecki, is the role of universities.
Yeah.
We are to teach today a course in campaigning. How can we approach the whole issue of ethics? Because when we look at what President Donald Trump has done, and many like him, the fabrication of facts, the lying,
Yeah.
have worked.
Yeah. It worked and it didn't work. He's not in such a good situation right now. He's about to leave office. However, I must say, 70 million people voted for him. How did that happen? I mean, the lying and the miscommunication, the fabrication, the whole delusions that he's conveying. This is someone who, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a political scientist, but this may be someone who has some issues, psychological issues, because of his upbringing, as we know, and the kind of upbringing now that we've learned that he's had, and how it's translated into basically a lack of morals and principles, frankly, to a large extent. I'm happy he had warp speed and he accelerated the advancement of vaccines. He should get credit for that. But for the previous 4 years, it's been a disaster. We have lost so much ground on so many issues. Not to mention, he's made a lot of lives miserable. He's made poor people and people of color, various groups of people of color, lives miserable in our country. When he ran for office, he asked African Americans, what do you got to lose? What are you voting for the Democrats? What do you got to lose? Vote for me. Well, now we know. Now we know what we got to lose. And we are now having a crisis, the most serious crisis since the founding of the country, constitutional crisis. And it's not over yet until the inauguration. We're still seeing a lot of the Republicans, a majority of them still think the election's not over, which is unbelievable. And these are, you would think, intelligent people, you know, they're professionals and so on and so forth, and wealthy people, prosperous people, a lot, you would think, enlightened people. But clearly he has he's got them scared. He's got such a following. He got 70 million votes that a lot of, not the Democrats aren't scared of, but the Republicans, I don't even know what the Republican Party means anymore. If I had to go into a classroom and explain to my students, what's the Republican Party? What do you tell them? How does this happen that this individual can come along and do this and manipulate media, manipulate science, and manipulate medicine and good research and facts, not to mention the importance of democracy. How did he get away with that? And that's something that we'll be studying for, I think, a very long time.
Hamoud, can you unmute
You are
yourself?
muted.
Yeah, thank you. I know you started your talk about advancement in science and the impact on science in our lives. There is now a call or a unanimous sort of support for the idea that we have to rethink higher education.
Yeah.
And how we communicate in different sphere of areas. I wonder if you have any ideas, if you can read into the future, how do you see higher education in the long term?
Yeah, I think, first let me say, I think higher education has been, in our, at least in the US, done, and many Asian countries, has been very successful, judging by how well the graduates have done and so on and so forth, and how the society has progressed. Mm-hmm. I do think it can improve by thinking more interdisciplinary about issues. And of course, that's my bias as someone who studies the environment. I can't just study politics. I can't just study policy. I have to learn about the science too. And so I've gone out of my way to try to understand, how does climate change happen? What's at the roots of climate change? How do these chemicals that go up in the atmosphere form a bubble over us and keep the warm area, and how does it change over? Why does it change in different parts of the world and not other parts, and in different ways? And I think that the kinds of issues we're talking about right now really cry out for greater interdisciplinary education. And I think some schools have been very aggressive and have jumped in to do this, but many schools have been very slow and have been, if you will, continue the traditional model of higher education, which is, I think, what we want to move away from, given what we were just talking about now, what the problems are now, what the issues, the fake news and everything, and how this all happened and so on. I have to add, though, that I also think there's a lot of blame goes to the K through 12 education, that it is not doing, because not everyone goes to college. I think maybe it's 2/3 or, well, I forgot, 60% of students go to college. So that's a lot of people to leave behind. And a lot of the supporters of Trump have been non-college educated whites. And so culture also plays into it, minority culture, and a separation from that. If we don't start at least there, even regardless of what we do at the higher education level, if we don't have a foundation from which to build on, and the kids come to us, they're already 18, 19 years old. We lost a lot of ground there when we could have been building a really nice foundation to go on to these more complicated issues and dramatic interactions of these issues: science, technology, policy, psychology, culture, philosophy, even our arts and music. My fellow deans in arts and music would complain to me that the school doesn't want to invest any money in it. You know, they don't care about it. And yet it's so important to the survival of cultures and the enlightenment of cultures. And yet we, as opposed to, compared to other countries, European countries do a much better job of introducing students to good art and culture and why it's good, and debate about it. I think that would also help us a great deal as well.
Anybody else has a question? Okay. Well, let me follow up on that one. Years ago, or I mean, there's still a debate there when you mention about liberal art education. There is a talk in California, in fact, there was a discussion or a proposal to limit liberal art education to the community colleges, and that people should now study STEM education. And but when you look at the market these days, the companies want liberal art graduates because they said they offer critical thinking, problem solving all along. Do you think with the funding, you mentioned the lack of resources to fund liberal arts education, will that change perhaps a lesson from this pandemic that we need to do better at educating the next generation? There's a report by the International University Association which highlighted the increased awareness of policymakers to keep attention to what they call competence higher education. I really don't know what that means, but the emphasis for them in the report is on giving a student a comprehensive education, and some of it is rooted in liberal art. With the funding, do you think that the US universities will take that advice to heart?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that as a dean I had wrestled with for a very long time. And college administrators above me have been wrestling with. I think it goes back to what I was talking about before, though. The capitalist system, again, is rewarding science and technology and engineering. How are your computer science classes doing? I bet you they're overflowing because of the marketplace. I think higher education's become too seduced by the marketplace, as well as I think they have also misread it, as you were implying, that it's not enough to be really sufficient to be technology expert or expert scientist or data management control person, data science person. You also have to have other skills, like how do you do a presentation? How do you communicate with other workers? How do you decipher what the situation is in society in terms of what kind of products that society could really benefit from? And I think that until we're able to address that and move away from the immense influence system, we will not be able to redistribute the kinds of resources we want. And I think the natural sciences and the the engineering folks will be getting the large share of the money. And it's also it's a catch-22 too, because those graduates go out and they make so much money, they give back to the school, they don't give back to my departments, usually, sometimes. They give back to the departments in which they came from, and they didn't take any classes in my, maybe took a GE class or two, one or two, but that's it, it was, they had to do it, but they give back money, so there's an impossible synergy going on there that also reinforces universities to provide more money for science and engineering.
Let me follow up on something you also said earlier on. In our younger days, you would go to the computer. I mean, the computer spaces are huge.
Yeah.
And I remember my class with you, where we used to spend hours and hours waiting for that printout to come about data that you had asked that we gather. We knew the steps about how to know the steps of SPSS. So we know all those things. That proved to be beneficial. Well, today, and you run a crosstab, you just type it and it gives you the result.
Yes.
That's a trend. We see it in how we teach science and statistics in this particular case. But there is also a shift in getting away from the classical literature. I mean, political theory classes today, or political thought, some of them hardly study the roots, the foundation of some of the classical work.
Right.
I wonder if we go in, at one point, we'll go back to the roots, so that a method class is not just satisfied with learning, just type in the word crosstab, but actually do the actual steps and learn from that. Do you see that direction that it's one of the ways perhaps that we need to go back to the basic?
I think that a lot of the social science disciplines, including political science, as you know, were racked by the incredible division, which was I think, very destructive, between those who study philosophy, classics, and political theory more generally, and those who do quantitative analysis. I was always puzzled by that as a student, although I try to keep my ideas to myself. But I always wondered, well, shouldn't they be cooperating with each other? Doesn't one inform the other? I mean, how should I know what to do an analysis about, let's say, very important questions of democracy if I haven't taken a course on the classics in democracy, like de Tocqueville and Adam Smith and all the and even further back into the Greek era, and study Plato and so on. And I think that is kind of the reason I bring this up. That's kind of an example of what's going on more broadly in the universities and colleges. And I think it is destructive and I think, but the only good thing that came out of it is it forced the quantitative people to argue why they do what they do and why it's important. Because I think they were making too many assumptions in doing what they're doing. I also feel that way about the scientists and the engineering people today, where I wonder how much they question about the ramifications of what they're doing and how it really is going to help society. Or does it help society? Well, maybe, does it have to? Maybe it's if they're going to make money with it, who cares? I don't know. But that's also a moral judgment, a moral issue that needs to be addressed, an important ethical issue. And I think that if we anything we're going to learn from this, I think that we're going to, I'm hoping in the colleges, universities, people are going to be forced to learn about the incredible importance of having democratic values, democratic institutions, the roles of courts and law and justice in society, all those things that were debated and written about in many years ago. And so I'm hopeful that will come out of all this, because having someone like this is an incredible nightmare person in office. And I apologize to anyone who supports Trump, but objectively speaking, has been a real eye-opener that if this could happen in our country, I think Americans have become too, up until now, too, just not thinking about the possibility, ignoring the possibility, too comfortable in the way government has been working and the way our democracy has been working. And I think that's true in other countries too. You can see this in Brazil going on and other countries as well. And I think that this requires us to teach students, not only in college, but K through 12, these classics, at least in a way that they can consume. Some of it's difficult material, but certainly exposing them and having class discussions about them is very important before they enter into college. So at least they have a foundation in which you and I can work with. Right now, they're just coming in and they've never even thought about these issues.
Nick Coleman has a comment. I think that will fit very well what you just said, and we can hear more from there. I believe we have to instill critical thinking skills back into our schools at the lower levels. It's the point that you made earlier. Media has the ability to have facts and shred individual beliefs by way of what medium it is disseminated to CNN or Fox News, for example. We need to teach our children the difference between facts and opinion.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, I think the scientific method, although it's very narrow and stringent and has a lot of requirements, is at least the starting point in which we can then take the discussion more generally into how we evaluate what is fact, what is fiction, what is truth, what are lies. What's deception and what's reality? How do we know, how do we process when we're faced with opinions or challenges by others, what they're saying to how our own belief systems exist and are formulated and how we use them. I don't think any of that is being done and can be and should be being done in colleges and universities as much as it should be being done. And I think this hopefully will open up that opportunity given what we've gone through the last 4 years.
Armand, do we have any other questions? I think you have one.
I have a question in regards to manipulation of facts in the area of like immigration. Given that policies have recently changed under the pretext of recovering the economy from COVID-19 by limiting the number of employment-based visas and students as well entering the US, do you think, or what impact do you think this will have on our country as a whole, especially in the field of science and technology, given that many of these individuals who have come here through the educational system and have stayed and become permanent residents have contributed greatly to the advancements of science and technology. Do you think these changes will impact individuals coming to the US? And even if our policies change?
It depends. It depends. I think that we have, this is one of the positive effects of capitalism that we have, that when you come here and you work hard and the company sees talent in you and promotes you and your salary increases over time and so on and so forth, you do well. And the word gets out that if you work hard, you actually do get, rewarded for it financially and quite well. That will, if that incentive continues, I think that we will see more and more people from other countries coming here, continue to see people coming here for that reason. Now, the government has given those areas, the high tech and advanced science areas, special visas and permission to come here because they want to have those people to come here because they contribute so much to science and technology in our country. What I haven't seen really is how that increased diversity alone has influenced and made our country more tolerant, at least segments of our country, like the 70 million who just voted for Trump, be more tolerant and more welcoming of people from other countries. I think that as our society as a whole, the people who are already here becomes more diverse. I think that we are going to see more tolerance and more invitations for other people from other countries to come here and to work here. And we'll see more people coming here, and that will then set off, I think, a chain reaction. Already the percentage of American whites is about 60–65%. It has been going down. And I think this is one reason why, I mean, some people in our country are afraid. They're afraid that the country's changing and that they're being left behind. And these are generally whites with no college education who are in, or work, are working class people basically, and it's really struggling to survive. I think and they see other people are prospering a lot, like a lot of these folks, in science and technology. And I think that it makes them angry, and they think that government does not really help them as much as they've helped, people who are advancing so much. So you also have to wonder what's going to happen with the Republican Party. I mean, if they continue like this, and with these demographic trends, both of people coming into the country becoming more tolerant, and in fact, inviting and encouraging diversity, requiring diversity, because it's a good thing. It means excellence. That you wonder where do they go with this? I mean, they might become just a permanent minority party. Because even after Trump leaves, it's they've abandoned their principles, almost all their principles from the past, and including adhering to democratic rules and norms and institutions. So I don't know, where do they go after Trump, post-Trump?
It's really a fascinating question. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll see how it goes, but the absence of independent, or the split specifically in the Democratic Party, a base that is heavily progressist, or has sort of center the left ideas and beliefs, and the party, the establishment, wanting to run from the middle, thinking that this will win them seats and legislative positions. I wonder also, I mean, we head into a crisis in political, in both parties. I would assume that in the next elections, the legislative elections in 2022, that a lot of minorities, if Biden doesn't deliver on some of the promises, will stay home, and maybe the Democrat will lose the House of Representatives.
Yes.
What's going to happen in 2024 if Trump remains in the scene? And I'm sure the media will keep him because he's a product. He sells everything. So I wonder your thought on that. If we're hidden, maybe this is the time when a third party emerges, and being an independent thinker will be better.
Yeah. Well, what could happen is if the Republican Party does become smaller. It's already lost a lot of followers people who identify as Republicans, and it continues to become smaller. It could open up a opportunity for progressives to continue to grow and form their own party, and we might end up actually with two minor parties, and then you've got this. The centrist Democratic Party is about 60%, so it is a pretty firm majority. But it can't win by itself, as you point out. It also needs the progressives. So either they have to decide that the progressives, for all the costs that are involved, their issues are addressed, including representation, diversity in government, and so on, and the needs of those folks, those groups in our society, or they decide that they're just going to stay centrist and not really change their views or modify their views. So they're really they're also at a turning point. But I think that it's far more serious in the Republican Party right now because of the incredible, we've never seen anything like this, incredible influence that Trump has, but but not only that, the issues, his positions are so out there, they're so extreme, and they had really very little to do with, I mean, some of it overlaps with what the Republican Party used to stand for, but a lot of it doesn't. This whole fascistic bent, in terms of supporting white supremacist groups, QAnon, these theories that are just made up, these conspiracy theories. I mean, this is weird stuff. Nothing like that's going on, thankfully. I mean, yeah, so the Democratic Party, it's got to, satisfy ACA and other, leading progressives. But I think that's easier for them to do, as well as significant minority groups that have supported Biden. And Biden is trying to respond in terms of bringing them into government, which Republicans refuse to do. I think those are easier because it's not as a large distance compared to the distance between who used to be the Republicans, like Marco Rubio and so on, and Donald Trump. I mean, there's a huge gap there, and it's scary. It's scary. I don't know what they're going to do. It'd be very interesting to see. Trump will be 4 years older then in 2024. So it's a lot of it will depend on his health and his state of mind and so on. Also, whether he becomes irrelevant. A lot of very few people lose the second time that they run for president in our country. And when you do lose, you become kind of pushed off on the side. You become irrelevant. Whether he can keep his following and to what extent, we'll have to see. As you're also wondering about.
Well, I think anybody else has a question there? Armand, how are we doing on time?
It is now 11:28, so we are.
I think, Dr. Kamieniecki, we come to our end. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a treat. And if there is no one from the audience to ask another questions, I'd like to conclude it, and we'll keep in touch. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Can our J1 scholars stay, please?
Excuse me?
Go ahead, Dr. Kamieniecki.
Excuse me?
Go ahead. Go ahead. We were listening to you.
Oh, I was asking I didn't hear Armand. She broke up when she was talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just asked if our J1 scholars could please stay after.
Thank you very much again, both of you, for having me. I've really enjoyed the discussion, and hopefully the participants did as well and learned something from it.
No, it was great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kamieniecki.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Armand, I'm leaving, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
Thank
all
you.
scholars, and maybe we need a way of how to get the scholars involved in asking questions, and if there is, maybe you want to discuss a way for them with Mr. Lim as well, of how to, if they have any questions, if we need to do better in terms of engaging them and things like that, if that's what they want. Yeah. Thank you, Armand.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hello. I just have a few things that I wanted to go over with you. And I don't know if Mr. Lim wanted to speak as well. Mr. Lim? Or maybe he stepped away. Anyway, I just wanted to take this time to first wish you all first thank you for joining us today. And to tell you that this is going to be our last meeting for the year. So may you all have a wonderful holiday, a great Christmas. May you, I know some of you are going to be traveling home. So if you are and you don't have a travel signature on your DS 2019, you need to contact me as soon as possible so I can sign off on the document and get it to you. If you have a travel signature, just check your date. A signature is valid for 1 year. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to contact me. In addition, just so you know that the campus will be closed from Christmas Eve, December 24th, and will reopen on January 4th, excuse me. So, and in addition, I'll be on vacation starting December 21st, but I will return on the 4th as well. So if you need to reach me, please do prior to the 21st. And then next year, our next meeting will be on January 26th at Tuesday at 10 a.m. And we are finalizing our speaker, but we hope to have Dr. Clarence Martin. He is a professor of criminal justice on our campus, and his area of specialty is terrorism. So once that's confirmed, he will be our speaker. And in beginning of next year, I will be requesting that each scholar do a summary of their research. And after our presentations, so you can give a summary to everyone about the research that you're doing, what you've accomplished to date, what your challenges are, and your next step. Does anyone want to volunteer to do that in January? Don't you all speak up at once? I see some smiling faces as if you might want to give us a very brief 10 minutes about the research, what you are studying here, what you've accomplished so far. Anyone want to volunteer? Anyone want to volunteer for February? Dohan, Lisa, Seren. Okay, well, I will just contact you directly. I'll just pick and contact you directly and then see if you have any questions. And I'll probably, someone who's been here for a while and at least, a year, maybe can just give us a brief summary. That way we all know what we're doing, and if there's something that we can do to support you, we can assist. Mr. Lin, does anyone have any questions? Or want to say any comments? No? Okay. Okay, everyone, then that'll be it for today. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And I will see you back in January, and I'll contact one of you guys individually. Okay, take care, everyone.
Yeah, 1 month.
Oh, someone
One
spoke.
month.
Yes. Oh, you're muted again.
Now the Mr. Now we cannot find the Mr. Lim. So maybe I guess Mr. Lim have something to discuss with us internally by Korean language, something like that. But now I cannot find him.
Oh, he's okay. Now his camera is. Mr. Lim, did you have anything that you wanted to discuss? But you're muted. Mr. Lim, you're on mute.
Hi everyone, I'm so sorry. I have every day in the morning I have internal meetings. Today is a little late, so I want to just see you and then greeting for last a month. So almost today I have no agenda